Rita was a seasoned traveler. Her thirst for adventure led her to remote corners of the world. She explored ancient ruins and bustling cities with equal enthusiasm. She craved the thrill of the unknown, but her latest adventure would test her courage in ways she could never have imagined. It began with a seemingly innocent vacation rental, an old farmhouse nestled deep in the countryside. The farmhouse promised peace and tranquility. It seemed like the perfect escape from the city's hustle and bustle. Rita booked it immediately, eager to experience its rustic charm. Little did she know that this secluded paradise hid a sinister secret. A secret that would turn her dream vacation into a living nightmare. The farmhouse stood at the end of a long, winding dirt road. Its weathered wooden exterior spoke of years gone by. The porch swing creaked gently in the breeze, as if beckoning visitors to sit and stay a while. The surrounding fields stretched out like an emerald ocean, their stillness broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Rita and her husband Mark arrived late in the afternoon. The setting sun cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn. The air hung heavy with the scent of honeysuckle and damp earth. As they stepped inside, they were greeted by the musty smell of an old house. Despite the eerie quiet, Rita felt a strange sense of excitement. This was the adventure she had been craving. The farmhouse was beautiful, a relic of a bygone era, but something about it felt off. They found it strange that such a charming property had so few online reviews. When they inquired about it, the rental agency was evasive. They mentioned something vague about the previous owners. They said the house needed some special care. Despite the red flags, the low price was tempting. They brushed aside their concerns, attributing the lack of reviews to the farmhouse's remote location. They convinced themselves it was a hidden gem. This decision, driven by their desire for adventure and affordability, would soon prove to be a grave mistake. That night, as Rita tried to sleep, she was disturbed by a strange sound. It was a soft creak, like a door slowly opening. She dismissed it as her imagination, the house settling in the night. But the next morning, she found a door ajar. It was the door to the attic, a room they hadn't touched. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, but it was the first in a string of increasingly eerie events that would plague their stay. Rita couldn't shake off the feeling that something was watching them. The silence of the farmhouse, once peaceful, now felt oppressive. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The creaking door was a warning, a sign that they were not alone. Section 5. Whispers in the Dark. As darkness fell, the farmhouse came alive with strange sounds, the creaking of the old wooden floors, the distant echo of footsteps, and the occasional thud from the attic created an unsettling symphony. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. It was as if the very house was trying to communicate, to share its long-forgotten secrets. Mark, a self-proclaimed skeptic, started to feel uneasy. He prided himself on his logical mind, but tonight, logic seemed to be slipping away. He couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move. Every corner seemed to hide a pair of unseen eyes. He mentioned hearing whispers at the edge of his hearing. Faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. They seemed to call his name, beckoning him deeper into the darkness. He felt a cold spot near the fireplace, a chill that seemed to follow him around the room. It was an unnatural cold, one that pierced through his clothes and settled into his bones. Rita tried to rationalize the events. She was always the voice of reason, the one who could explain away the unexplainable. She told herself it was the wind, the old plumbing, their imaginations running wild. But even she couldn't deny the growing sense of dread. But deep down, a seed of fear had been planted. It grew with every creak, every whisper, every cold draft that brushed against their skin. The whispers, the cold spots, the feeling of being watched. It was all too real to ignore. They tried to convince themselves it was all in their heads, but the evidence was mounting. The farmhouse was no longer a place of peace and tranquility. It had transformed into a living entity, one that thrived on their fear. It had become a prison of fear. The walls seemed to close in, the air grew thick with tension, and the once cozy farmhouse now felt like a sinister trap. Section 6. The Utility Room, a Portal to Fear. The following morning, Rita went to the utility room. She had an uneasy feeling, a sense of dread that she couldn't shake off. The door, which she distinctly remembered closing the previous night, was wide open. It was as if someone, or something, had deliberately left it that way. Inside, cleaning supplies were scattered across the floor, creating a chaotic scene that was far from the neat arrangement she had left. It looked as if someone had been rummaging through them, searching for something, or perhaps just causing havoc. The air was thick with an icy chill, a cold so intense it felt unnatural, almost otherworldly. It was a bone-chilling cold that seemed to cling to her skin, seeping into her very bones, sending shivers down her spine. Rita backed out slowly, her movements deliberate and cautious, as if any sudden motion might provoke whatever presence lurked there. Her heart was pounding in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears like a drum. She told Mark about the utility room, her voice trembling with fear and urgency. He tried to dismiss it, offering rational explanations, but his words lacked conviction. She could see the fear in his eyes, a fear he was trying hard to mask but failing miserably. They were both starting to realize that there was something terribly wrong with the farmhouse. It was no longer the safe haven they had once thought it to be. The playful whispers of the wind had transformed into menacing growls, echoing through the halls and rooms. The farmhouse, once a charming retreat, had become a sinister entity, a place where fear and darkness reigned. Section 7. The Doll A Gaze That Followed. Later that day, Rita stumbled upon a peculiar item in the attic, a porcelain doll. It was unlike any doll she had ever seen before, with an unsettling aura that seemed to fill the room. It was lying discarded in a dusty corner, almost as if it had been deliberately hidden away. Its once vibrant paint now faded and cracked, giving it a ghostly appearance that made Rita shiver. The doll's glassy eyes seemed to follow her every move, as if it were alive and watching her intently. They held a depth of malice that sent chills down her spine. Rita couldn't explain it, but the feeling was undeniable. She felt a profound sense of unease emanating from the doll, a sensation that grew stronger the longer she looked at it. She decided to show the doll to Mark, hoping he would dismiss her fears and reassure her that it was just an ordinary doll. But as soon as he saw it, his face went pale. He admitted to having seen the doll earlier, sitting on a rocking chair in the living room. Mark's reaction was not what Rita had expected. His usual calm demeanor was replaced by a look of sheer terror. He confessed that he had seen the doll before, but had dismissed it as a figment of his imagination. The doll had been sitting on a rocking chair in the living room, the same chair that had been eerily swaying when they first arrived. It was as if the doll had moved on its own, a thought that sent a wave of dread through both of them. The idea that the doll could move by itself was terrifying, but the evidence was hard to ignore. It seemed to be observing them from the shadows, its presence a constant, unsettling reminder that they were not alone. Deciding they had seen enough, Rita and Mark left the attic, but the doll's gaze seemed to follow them, lingering in their minds long after they had gone. As the attic door closed behind them, an eerie silence filled the space, leaving the doll alone in the darkness once more. Section 8. The Intruder. A fleeting glimpse of horror. That night, Rita woke up with a gasp. She felt a presence in the room, a coldness that seemed to suck the air from her lungs. As she turned towards the window, she saw a figure standing in the yard. It was a woman, her face obscured by the darkness. Her eyes, however, glowed with an eerie luminescence. They seemed to bore into Rita's soul, filling her with an unspeakable dread. Before Rita could scream, the figure vanished. She woke Mark, her voice trembling with fear. He tried to calm her down, but he couldn't deny the terror that gripped them both. The farmhouse was no longer just whispering to them. It was showing them its true, horrifying nature. Section 9. A Haunting in the Kitchen. The next morning, they decided to leave. As they packed their bags, the kitchen door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Rita and Mark exchanged terrified glances. They rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if an unseen force was holding it shut, trapping them inside the house. Panic surged through them as they rattled the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread, as if the house itself was closing in on them. They were prisoners in their own personal nightmare. Section 10. Escape from Nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, the door suddenly swung open. They didn't waste a second. They fled the farmhouse, leaving behind their belongings and their sanity. As they sped away, they could have sworn they saw the porcelain doll in the window, its malevolent eyes fixed on them. They never returned to the farmhouse. They tried to forget the horrors they experienced, but the memories lingered like a recurring nightmare. The farmhouse, with its charming facade and sinister secrets, had left an indelible mark on their souls. Section 11. The lingering shadow of the farmhouse. Back in the city, the normalcy of their lives did little to erase the trauma. Every creak in the night, every cold draft, sent shivers down their spines. They couldn't escape the feeling that something from the farmhouse had followed them home. The experience had changed them, filled them with a sense of unease that refused to fade. The farmhouse remained, standing silently at the end of the long, winding road, a testament to the horrors that lay hidden beneath its charming exterior. It stood as a warning to those who dared to disturb its peace, a chilling reminder that some secrets are best left buried.